We are live.
Hello, hello, and welcome to the Literary Roadhouse Book Club. Today we're discussing White Light by Vanessa Garcia. I'm Anais. I'm joined today by Literary Roadhouse regulars Maya Good and Gerald Hornsby. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Thank you for making me read this.
Yes.
This was your choice.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Okay. Let's get this love fest started. Overall impressions. Maya.
Loved it.
Gerald.
Loved it.
Oh my God, I also loved it. This is just going to be
Yeah.
a love fest.
Yeah,
Here's what I have
Okay.
to say. This book, you were saying you're not sure how to talk about this book. I'm not sure how to talk about this book. It was a short book. You picked it because it was short. You were like, yeah, it's not that long. I've heard good things. It was such a slow read for me, but it was slow because I kept having to stop and write down amazing quotes from this book. There's something about this writer because she's a painter and because she's a poet. She looks at art in such a different way that this book is now, like, I got it from the library. I went ahead and picked it up on Kindle so I can have it with me at all times. There are certain books I keep with me as a writer, not for reference, but for inspiration. All is forgotten, nothing is lost. The one everyone talks about with Stephen King. There are certain books that aren't about craft, they're about the life of an artist. I'm sure it'll end up being up there once I read it. And this is now one of those books. I can see myself reading this book annually, underlining. If I had like a paper copy, it would have just been covered in marginalia. So yes, to say I love this book is an understatement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start with what I think right off the bat for me was immediately the biggest wow is just the language and the voice.
And you froze.
No.
What?
Oh,
Did I freeze?
You did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
No.
Okay.
No, not today, man.
So why don't we start with what for me right off the bat was like the biggest wow before you even know anything about the story, just the language and the voice. Gerald, if you have any amazing comments.
Yeah, I actually it was a really strange book to read because when I started reading it and every time I came back to it, I thought, oh, I have to read this for the book club. I have to read this. And like 3/4 of an hour later, I thought, oh, where did that time go? It's one of those stories, and the story is quite sort of simple, really, and it's not that involved a story, but the the sort of narrative, if you like, the top layered narrative. But there's so much to it. There's so much depth to it. There's so much that's gorgeous about it, and every time I sort of pause to do something else, I then started to reflect on writing and what writing means and how writing should be approached. So as Maya said, it's about this overall view of art, not just art as in typical paintings and stuff, but the art, the creative process. It's kind of hard to talk about, but it was very, very nice.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna respond to your question with a couple quotes. Starting with the first freaking line. Okay, blew me out of the water. Sometimes you wake up with a hole in your heart and you're not sure why. It's a circle carved by something you can't touch, something that opens up in your sleep and wakes you up hungry. Seriously, this book is written with so much poetics, like on a level that I'm not used to seeing in modern fiction at all. There's so many amazing lines. Sometimes the sky in Miami makes you want to believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not just the prose. The dialogue is amazing. The scene when the narrator is in the hospital. Excuse me, are you walking away from me? Where's the supervising nurse? Where's the doctor? Are you telling me it's because he's fat you just don't care? This book was full. Like I literally had to stop like every other page to write something down. And that was with restraining myself from writing something down every page.
I kept trying to like analyze how she structures her sentences because they are deceptively simple. The one thing that kept blowing me away about the language and the voice was the way in which she never feels over sentimental, even though it's emotionally attuned character. It never felt overwrought or over the top.
Frozen again.
Sentimental.
Come back.
Did I freeze again?
Yeah.
Just for a second.
Oh, why am I freezing when right now there's no one else on the internet? So what I was saying was, what I liked about her reason why I kept analyzing just the way that she structures sentences was she was able to eyes. There was moments I was like, oh, didn't see that coming. She was able to create humor. There was moments where I laughed out loud. But most of the time, what I felt was that motif of the hole in the heart. There's a lot of holes, right? That's a motif that keeps, and she made me as the reader feel that, yet the writing was never overwrought. It was never over sentimental, even though the character herself, the narrator herself, is a very like emotional, sensitive person. I never felt like, you know how sometimes you read writing and I think the word is like cloying, right? Like it's just like they're trying too hard to make you feel. Here I felt like she was never trying too hard to make me feel, and yet there was just lines where I'm like, oh, that ruined me. I'm gonna cry right now.
Yeah.
It was just where she's talking about how as a girl they would sleep with the mother in the pink bedroom that the girl shared, and sometimes the mother would feel bad for the father who's obese, so she would send the girls, but the girls would try to escape. She would leave sometimes because she'd rather sleep with her mother and sister. Mom never made me go back after those escapes, but later in the years he was gone from my life, while I was in high school and college, the echo of those sad eyes when he'd catch me escaping would appear out of the blue. They still do. It's just like, oh, my heart. Like,
I remember that quote. That was one of them. It did. It just reached in and it grabbed you. And the level of one of the things that I will say that takes it out of cloying, because it very easily could have been cloying.
That's what
but
she does.
She's looking at these kind of like visceral, like distasteful things on a very just honest level. So when she's describing her father, she describes him as he is. When she's describing her relationship with her father, she's not the good girl, he's not the bad guy. She's not the bad girl, he's not the good guy. It's just as he is. And that makes it so that when she does have these emotions, it's not sentimentalized, because you know that she's had these issues. You know that he's fat and it grosses her out. These are all things that you're not supposed to say out loud. And that's the thing that makes it so that's not sentimental. She says all these things that you're not supposed to say out loud from the very beginning when she's on the airplane and she sees the guy that's nervous about flying, but because he's young and because he's black, she's scared he's going to be a terrorist. Like, it's just so just blatant and laid out on the page that when she gets emotional, you just ride with her.
I wonder at that first bit where she was on the plane and she was looking at this guy and it's it turns out he was okay, and I thought, oh, is she going to do this? Is she going to it seemed such a strong way to start, such a strong thing to open the book with. But actually, it should. And what you were saying earlier about how she deals with the emotions and the level of emotion in the story that's not cloying. She lets her characters show you what's going on, show you what they're feeling. She doesn't write the emotion to tell you. She lets the characters show you what they're feeling, and she does that really, really well.
Yeah. And the other thing is the way I think Maya hit the nail on the head. What she said is just the honesty of the way that she describes things, but also I feel like she's really good at writing regret. Like that first time when there's the Paris scene and she's thinking back now as an adult and she remembers the shame she had when she realized for the first time, oh, my dad's obese. That's why coming up these stairs, he can't take it. And then as an adult, she realizes he did this for me. He went up those stairs, even though he was winded and it was exhausting and he was obese and it's huge effort for him to get up those stairs. And he did it for me. And in a way, my father himself is a frustrated artist. And he there was that one line where she's like, he didn't have parents who would take him to Paris and take him to museums and show him these things to nurture his inner artist. And the way that she would write that regret sometimes, what I think was what did that kind of like hole in the heart thing for me so much. Like that was so painful to read. And again, she's not being overly sentimental about it. Oh, so good.
No, not at all. And he is not painted as this ambivalent, sad, everyone did him wrong creature. Like that scene when he her he's going to kill himself, or the scene when he takes the girls in the car and is talking about the mother, or the scene when he gets pissed off and takes away her van that he just gave her for her 16th birthday. Those were brutal scenes. Like he was acting in a really brutal, unhinged way, and yet we still had sympathy for him as a man. And I think that took real art. I think that this book is benefited from the fact that she's not just a writer. The fact she's a playwright and a poet and a painter is influencing her work on every single level in this book. And I want to be able to capture that for my own work. There's just something in here that is really, really special. If it doesn't win a ton of awards, I'm going to be shocked.
Yeah. That was my other thing. I'm like, how come this isn't more celebrated? I am confused.
It will be. Yeah. I'm waiting for it to turn up Man Booker 2017. It was published in 15, so it'll be eligible for next year, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but
I hope so, because it deserves to at least be on the long list.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing, now that we're sort of jumping ahead a little to character, but the father, the way that he was portrayed, it also felt to me like it's such a well-drawn Cuban man. There is something about him where I'm like, I know this guy intimately. Everything from like the slight gangster swagger, but then the really kind of devoted, like the way that he like buys everything for Ileana because he loves her, and the devotion to the daughters, and the sort of acceptance that they're weird and not quite knowing how to communicate that. Like there's the really good side, and there's that like weird gangster swagger to it. And even everything to like the putting his head through the wall, like that to me was like, yeah, that makes total sense for this character. Really? Like it's something that I've seen and experienced, in my own extended Cuban family, which is why it's like that also for me just rung so true. Like I was cracking up at the hospital scenes, even though it's in a hospital scene.
Oh, with all the girlfriends showing up.
Yeah, not just all the girlfriends, but like she would occasionally give you the list. Like it starts off 3 people are here. Now 7 people are here. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Yeah. And Luisa's not here. And everyone's talking shit about Luisa for not being here. Yeah, that is 100% accurate. That is how Cubans handle hospital visits. But
yeah.
No, the other thing I was going to say, and then the way that you're in a hospital, but you start telling the same stories you tell at the Thanksgiving table, that you tell at Christmas about the time he fell off the horse. There was just something so familiar for me as a Cuban American where I was just like, She really put on paper something that I never thought was unique or special until I saw it written down.
Yeah, I would go a step above that and say that not only did she put the culture on there, but there are things in here that a lot of authors of color, we all have those things that we talk about with our inside voice that we don't talk about in the outside voice. I talk about that a lot on the other show. There's a lot of inside voice in this book. There's a lot of little things that Cubans know about each other that they don't necessarily put on paper. They don't put it on blast. It would promote stereotypes or whatever. But she puts it on paper. She's just like, this is what it is. And that's really special. I agree. Special is the perfect word for that description, because as I'm reading this, I'm thinking back to people that I knew when I was on the East Coast. And they felt so real, and it reminded me of the guy that owns the Cuban cafe that pissed me off because he wanted to talk politics, and I just wanted to go there and read a damn book. Guy, in so many ways, really, really special and delicate, but not done in a way that is like cruel. It's done with so much love and such a delicate hand. Yeah.
I think it's also important to say that as non-American and non-Hispanic, I think it's not all about being Cuban or about the Cuban family. It's not impenetrable. There are some bits of Spanish in there, but they don't need translating. They're just dropped in for sort of added color. But as an English guy, this book reads really, really well, and is a great insight into into this particular type of family.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to also say that the characters are so well rounded, so they're not good, they're not bad, they're just people with good bits and bad bits. And even Leo, who comes across as one thing earlier on in the book, is then shows a different side to him later on in the book. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because there was also some things that would come up and I'm like, wait, is this only a Cuban thing though, or is this an everybody thing? And I think it's a Cuban thing. And there was two places where I had that. One was the Victoria's Secret bag for carrying other things around. I don't know why Cubans have decided Victoria's Secret bags are like the perfect like bag for carrying random stuff. But like I have like really, vivid memories of like my grandma sewing stuff in a Victoria's Secret bag. Just like random stuff. And that's just what this is used for now. I don't know. Was this just a Cuban thing, or does everyone love Victoria's Secret bags because of like the hard
I've never seen it outside of East Coast and like where there's a lot of Cubans and Dominicans. Never seen it.
And the other thing was that the father really, really wanted expensive watches, but very specifically the blue-faced watch with the gold around it. I remember when my dad finally like made it in his career, got the degrees that he wanted the freaking gold watch with the blue face. Was there some really effective marketing campaign that I missed, or is this a Cuban thing?
I don't know. I've never even heard of this.
No.
Oh my God, this is the thing. This is what I'm talking about. There's all these things from like, is this just us
Inside
or is this
baseball.
Everybody? Yeah. What is with the blue face gold watch? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think we have it.
And when my dad got it, he was also peacocking about that damn watch.
Wow, really? Is it real though? It's not a fake.
Is it real?
Yeah, I think my dad's I think it was a Movado, not a Rolex. So
yeah, Movados are beautiful. They're more classy.
Yeah, there you go.
Rolexes are kind of flashy.
Luckily, I don't like Rolexes.
But yeah.
Hate mail to
Mail at LiteraryRoadhouse.com. I don't like Meter Gerald. You're not the only one.
Well, okay, but before we get into all the characters, because we're going to spend forever there.
Can we talk about the Spanish?
Oh, yeah. So let's just continue with language. Exactly. Let's talk about Spanish, symbols, motifs. Go.
Okay. My only problem in this book was the way Spanish was used for the first half of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Second half, it was seamless. It worked really well. The first half, it would actually take me out of the story, which is interesting because when I read Junot Diaz, it doesn't take me out of the story. In the first half of the story, the way the Spanish was used, it was frequently felt like a punctuation point or like an add-on. It didn't feel natural in that first half of the book. In the second half of the book, the Spanish felt much more natural. I didn't have to look anything up. I didn't feel like it was tacked on. It didn't stop me in the mid-sentence. So there was definitely like an ease of which it was used in the second half that I did not feel it was used in the first half. In the first half, the Spanish was used primarily for like honorifics.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they were placed in the sentence didn't ring true to me. Like when I hear Spanish people mix up their Spanish and their English, that's not how it's done. And it just didn't feel natural, and it was like a hiccup.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you say that, because for me, throughout the whole book, there was a lot of times where she would write something in Spanish and then write something in English immediately after to help clarify what the Spanish was, that I saw as this is just for, obviously, the English-only audience. Because to me, because like it's true, in a Cuban-American family, there's a lot of Spanglish in the same sentence. And there are certain phrases where you will then say something in Spanish and in English without breaking the sentence. But the way she did it, it was a translation of what she just said. And I was like, that's not actually the way that Cubans talk. But it didn't bother me because I'm like, I understand that this book isn't just for Cubans. Yeah. So, so like there was a little bit of that where like those parts didn't feel true, but I almost feel like it's an editor telling her like, no one knows what this is. Yeah. You need to clarify.
Yeah, but it could have been done more skillfully, in my opinion, because Junot Diaz does this very seamlessly. And when you read his stories and he lapses into Spanish, it doesn't hiccup off the page. It just kind of flows. You don't necessarily need it translated. Mm-hmm. And you continue reading. Whereas when she did it, it definitely stopped me.
Yeah, it's because Junot Diaz, what he does is he'll do like a word or a phrase that you can understand from the context clues. She would do entire dialogue in Spanish, but it's because it's the phrases that even if you're talking to another Cuban in English, you just switch to that Spanish one because it's easier. And it's funny, even though Adam is English and I'm American and we speak each other almost primarily in English, there's a few phrases that even amongst ourselves will switch to Spanish because it's just easier to refer to it in Spanish, and we live in Costa Rica. So it's a little bit of a similar thing between Cuban Americans. So I feel like for her, it's because she's doing a whole sentence that you would always say in Spanish for whatever reason.
Even the ones where she wasn't doing a whole sentence that did it to me. Like some of the ones where she would throw in Tia, it was like in the wrong place. And that hiccuped for me. So it did go beyond that. But yeah, that was an issue. Gerald, you didn't have any problems with the Spanish, did you?
No, I'm sort of, sometimes I can because I speak some sort of Latin language, so I do pick up the words from the context, and it's sort of parts of the word match what I would expect them to be. So, but even when it didn't, I just sort of read straight over. It didn't detract for me, to be honest.
Okay.
I was also really interested in all of the motifs that can coming up. So we brought up the hole in the heart. There was a lot about shattered glass, a lot about the ground. And there was one more I need to find in my notes that kept coming up over and over and over and over, but kept morphing. Like she's, I'm just a love fest. But just how like the way she would use the same motif in the beginning to mean one thing, by the end of the book, it had twisted as the character grew and her interpretation of that same motif has changed. I was like, this is so good. This is what I mean by I can't talk about this because I just...
It's just so good.
It's just so good.
It's good. Read it, everyone.
Yeah, just read it. Yeah. I already told my parents they have to read it.
Oh, totally. I have several people. I'm like, you must read this. I want to hear like a really in-depth analysis, and you're the only person I know that's capable of doing it. One of the things when you're talking about, motifs, I would say the structure of the book itself is a motif. I found it very interesting that broken up into 3 parts. Painting is Not Dead is quote unquote the first chapter. It lasts 50 pages. It's written conventionally, chapters and scenes and extra line in between scenes. You get to Pieces of Man where her father is dying, and it's sped up. The sentences are shorter and the scenes are numbered. So you get like this countdown, this feel in that entire section. It's a really long section into chapters. It's just these numbered scenes, and there's something about the numbered scenes, like Eminence, that story we read almost 2 years ago, that causes you to have this sense of dread because you don't know what the last number is going to be. You don't know when it's coming, but you know it's coming, and it's just killing you. And even the name of the scene, Pieces of Man, and you're talking about him dying, and he's described a lot in pieces. His belly, his face, his neck. It's just
his organs are given out. They're doing it.
Yeah, it's so amazingly done as like a literary device. And then the last section is Dying, and that's where she's using art to put herself back together, kind of. And that's divided up into colors.
Yes, I love that.
I'm just like, who is this woman?
Because she's actually doing the art there, so the colors are all important, and the colors reflect different parts of what's going on as well.
And the poetic descriptions of the colors at the head of each section. I just can't do it. It's just so beautiful.
I know. And you would immediately see that color in the scene that succeeds it in like a first paragraph, and then that becomes a central point, whatever it is, whether it's the old China screen her grandmother had or whatever it is that is pulling in that color, then it's like threaded throughout that scene beautifully and like keeps reappearing just for that scene. What?
Okay, I'm gonna say it. This is better than The Sellout.
I'm gonna say this is the best one we've read on Book Club all year.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's so good.
No.
By the way, just real quick, the 4th motif was empty chairs. That was the one I was missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, when the chair is empty in the photograph. Oh my God, the father's dying.
Yeah. And really, she's that's I think that's where she's unique, because she's creating art with her words, with the story. So and the story that she's writing is in parallel with the character's art that she's creating, and the two are sort of matched. You can it's like modern art, and you can look at a piece of modern art and think, yeah, what's that's just streaks of paint and nothing. But the more you look at it, the more it drags you in, and the more you see the important stuff that the artist is trying to. And it's the same with her writing. It's it's a story, and the father dies, blah, 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 but there's so much more to it. So much more.
Well, Gerald, if you're struggling on, if not you, but in general, if anyone is struggling on how to look at modern art, just look at the example of how to analyze Guernica in this book. She even teaches you how to look at a painting.
Yes.
I'm just like, what? That was mind blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I will say, because this story lends itself to really in-depth literary analysis. It seriously does. Like, I could see this book being taught in a class and spending a semester just analyzing so much. It uses all the tools in the literary toolbox. You could learn so much about literature just going through this book layer by layer. But at no point does this book feel too dense to understand. Does it feel difficult? It reads really simply. It reads poetically, but it reads very simply. And I think that's something that's hard to do for a lot of writers that are writing art. Like, this is art. This isn't a story. And for a lot of writers that write such dense literature, the books can come off difficult to read and intimidating. And at no point does this book feel intimidating.
Nope.
No. And all her characters are almost larger than life, almost literally sometimes. They're all fascinating characters that can interest you as a, if you like, as a surface reader, so you can follow the story. And yes, the dad dies, and yes, she has to get into her art, and there's a pressure on her because of this almost once in a lifetime exhibition that she's got. But that's it's the old iceberg thing again. You've got an interesting story with great characters, but then under the surface there's all this other stuff going on, and once you're involved in the story, it just drags you in, and you just sort of swimming around under the surface looking at all this other stuff that's going on. It's so well done.
Yeah, and speaking of the characters, there's so many relationships that she describes or portrays so just honestly and accurately. Like, she just zeroes in. So, like, the relationship with Tony, that whole thing. Oh my God. Like, the way how, like, from one page to the next, I love him, he's the best, he's amazing. And the next one, how am I with somebody who doesn't understand fine art? And I'm like, I get that. I have had these thoughts. I understand this. Or just like the relationship with the sister, and like that understanding of somebody who, even if you've never told them all your secrets, knows all your secrets anyway, because they're so close to you, they can basically read your mind. Or the way that the mother, it was just so many things about the relationships. I was just like, it just felt, there was just many moments where I was like, I have lived this. I have lived this exact same thing. How did you pull this out of my life?
Okay, you guys talk, because I've got to go grab my paper version of the book, because I have a quote I need to read.
Okay. Yeah. So, but Gerald, what you were saying about the larger than life characters, most of them didn't feel larger than life to me because they felt so accurate and because they feel like characters that I have seen in my own life. The only one that did feel a little bit larger than life was Lee.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she's a New York art critic, like art dealer. They're just larger than life.
They're just weird.
I think because it's a different culture, so it's I don't know the culture. I don't know these type of characters. So
they're real.
Yeah, because that was all brought out in her writing, and you really understood, what she was trying to say about those characters and what the characters were saying about themselves. It's like you're saying, this book should be studied, and the way that she writes characters is it's so spot on. So and the way of telling a story, a fairly straightforward, simple story, but with so much beneath it, it's just very, very good. Yeah, it's probably, I think Sellout was as good in a different way. But this is I shall revisit this story, because it's I was making tea in the kitchen, and I was just thinking about my writing and art and what it should be like and how things should be. It's good.
And it's one of those stories that stay with me, and it was also affecting my writing, just like in IMs, like just me on Instant Messenger talking to a friend. All of a sudden, I'm having these like really deep poetic words. I'm like, wow, this book is affecting me when I'm just talking about like, are we gonna go to Starbucks? Yeah. Like it's like immediately inspirational, and it affects you.
Yeah.
Okay, I cannot find it, but there is a quote in here where she is annoyed by his snoring, and she literally in the same sentence says, "I hate him. I want him to fuck me."
Yeah.
Do you remember that line? And I was like, "Oh my God, I know that." Like, you're just so mad, just, and it was perfect. And okay, this is gonna have to go explicit. I'm sorry, but the other thing is, if you want to read how you can write sex in a way that is not full of stereotypes, obnoxious, stupid, lame, drawn out, no like hooving bosoms, like none of that. This book on page 87, the way she describes the first time she sleeps with Tony is so full of that new tension and fear and nervousness, and it doesn't back away from what's actually happening on the page. Can I read it, Anais, or are you gonna get mad at me for reading it in public? Did she just freeze?
Yeah, I did freeze a little bit, but yeah, I'm back.
Can I read it, Anais, or you
Yes.
get mad at me?
No, read it. We'll just put explicit, it's fine.
Okay, so when they meet, they're like super skinny. She's like super skinny and she's having food issues. Okay, for anyone that forgets what happened. "We will never do anything you don't want to do," he told me when he first had me in his arms, his naked body next to mine, his hands caressing my bony cage toward my inward curving stomach, down the length of my body, down to my throbbing clit, which felt as though when he touched it, it might burst like an eardrum full of too much music. I shook the first time he placed me above him. "You're trembling," he said, and I said yes. And he helped me to sway and pump on top of him, slowly building up speed, his hands at my waist, my flat breast, until again the water flowed freely, and he'd say, "You're so wet," and we'd lie next to each other, our bodies exhausted, mine wanting more. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. As far as being a woman and being with somebody the first time, and that nervousness about your body, that nervousness about what's happening, but you're gonna go with it, and even to the point where mind wanting more. There's a lot of literature out there about how female sexuality is like a subconscious threat to male sexuality because it seems so unending and you can never really fill it up, and so many cultures have spent so much time with religion or anything trying to tamp it down. And that idea that after this amazing experience they're curled up to each other and she wants more still. Like there's something there. And she's such a whole. Again, you were talking about the whole. And at that point in the story, she is a whole. Like literally, she's a whole. She needs food. She needs love. She's just this whole. And Tony's filling her up. And it's exquisite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To be honest, that's my one criticism of the book is the very graphic nature of some of the sex scenes, and it's probably because I'm British and a bit uptight and stuff.
You would prefer fade to black.
Well, I thought it just crossed the line in maybe 3, 4, 5 places into over graphic for me, but. Yeah, that's my one.
See, I appreciated the mix of poetics with the clinical. Because she could have used an euphemism. And I am so tired of writers that are scared to write about sexuality using euphemisms. I'm just like, say it. It's a clit. Just get it out there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of between you guys, and the fact that the first time I read it, or even the second time, I was like really shocked by it. I was just like, oh, okay, this is like out of nowhere. Not out of nowhere. Like the first time, I didn't expect that word because she hadn't been vulgar anywhere else up until there. But it just also made perfect sense with the story that is so raw and is unafraid and is so honest. So it's almost like if it were any other book, I think I'd have more issues with it. But in this book, it makes sense.
Yeah. And when you're told or you're shown her food issues and her body issues as well, so there's that sort of base level. So I can see that it sort of fits in with that or clinical description and clinical level of this woman. It's one of her many levels, but it's just because me.
Yeah, it doesn't to me, I find clinical language not to be vulgar. I actually find the euphemisms and the overwrought like pages of sex scenes in most literature, both literary and not, to be obnoxious. And this, it was short, it was to the point, and it also drove something else in the story, which I think is the bigger point. You know, it wasn't just gratuitous. Like that little paragraph, it's a small paragraph, told you a lot about their connection, their relationship to each other, her feelings about her body, how much he was able to help her bypass those feelings about her body. It developed their relationship as a character within that paragraph, rather than just being, oh, well, I guess they're gonna have sex now.
Yeah. Although I will say, after the breakup, so here's the thing. So I feel like this book has a little bit for every kind of reader. Even if you're a surface reader, there's enough going on here. There's enough shocks and enough things to hook you. And one of the surface things that comes towards the end is very, it's like it has, everything here has layers. But on the surface, everything after the breakup, I'm like screaming at Tony. I hated Tony at the end. Like, screw this guy. But there's so much there about that kind of guy. Like, it's so accurate, you know, like it was just so honest. Like, I'm like, I know that guy. Like, again, like it's just so good.
He is what he is, isn't he? And he knows he can't commit to something that he can't follow through on later on. So he's, you know, and he's uptight about the whole marriage thing and commitment thing. And
sure, he doesn't have to marry her. But it doesn't have to be a dick about it, like with the booty calls. And then the whole thing where like he's breaking up with her. He knows it hurts her. Okay, you can break up with people even if it hurts them. You don't have to be with somebody forever. But then he's trying to make himself feel better, being like, I'm the good guy in this. There's no reason we need to hurt each other. Screw you, buddy. Own up to the pain. Live through it.
Come sailing with me.
Yeah, and it's all honest stuff. Like, that's stuff that happens.
Yes, it is.
It happens. That in and out, that breakup, but the calls and the missing each other, but still broken up. Why? I mean, he was there. He's that guy that wants to fix somebody, that wants somebody that's dependent on them emotionally. And then once that person doesn't need fixing anymore.
Yeah, she made it now.
Yeah, and it was because the writer made it known through her character that she didn't like him calling, I don't know what the word was, that name that he has for her.
Gordita.
Yeah.
And she said, why is he calling me that? You know, I'm not that anymore. But he keeps on calling her that, and she's uncomfortable with it. And she, you know, she wants one thing or other. She can't just keep on doing this.
There is a type of guy out there, you know, that's what I'm saying by so accurate. It's the guy who wants to be the good guy so much, who never wants to be seen as the one who caused pain or did anything else, but at the same time extremely selfish and manipulative, and that's Tony. You know what I mean? Like he, like it's just like I know you. Oh, so yeah.
I dated him.
And then the thing is, because they never actually were explicitly a dick, it's all under the surface. You can't talk about it. There's all this gaslighting going on. Like,
you think you're crazy. You think maybe it's all your fault. Yep. I'm 3 years out now.
Yeah. And the narrator experiences that a lot, where she's just like, what are these messages, or what does this mean? Has he regretted it? She goes over there hoping that he regretted the whole thing. And I just want to shake her and be like, he hasn't. I know him.
Yeah, because he just calls her and says, come over. And she, you know, and yes, you can see her in that situation thinking, you know, why does he want me over? Is there something, you know, does he want to tell me something? No.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But how amazing that this guy feels so real, and it's fiction. Like, that's, again, just the skill of the author. Like, yeah.
So since I really wish we had a guest on the show that wasn't a writer, because I'm wondering if a non-writer will see as much in this book as we do, because we all write.
I will say the main plot element is it very whoop. So I know what you're saying about how I do wonder if primarily a reader who reads genre would get into this.
You know, I think the beauty of the language and the emotions would carry the majority of them. But there's so much nuance here that's going to go over the head of so many people. Like, that's where I say that this is, while it can be read by anybody, this is a beautiful literary novel. Like, big L literary.
It's a good point. It's a good point as to how many readers will think about the levels and the depths of the story and the, you know, the way she's written it.
Yeah. And like I said, the main central plot, it isn't it isn't the kind of plot that somebody who isn't a literary reader could really care about too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is the epitome of that definition of literary where it's more about the character than it is about the plot. It's more about the language than it is about the plot. But I will say there is definitely a plot, and there are scenes in this where you are just emotionally just ripped apart. And, you know, there's so much that happens, but a lot of it's emotional happening. And I think it's done in the best way. Like when you talk about books that are really based on emotions and changing character, I think this is the perfect example of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many more good things to say right now. I'm like,
this book, man.
And here's the thing, like you said, you know, somebody who isn't a writer, somebody who doesn't read literary fiction may not get a lot of the nuance. I'm sure I missed a ton that is in here. There's no way I caught all of it at all, you know? It's so, like, I'm pretty sure if I read this 10 years from now, having been exposed to more stuff, I'm going to catch things that I completely missed.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's a good book.
It is definitely one of those books. I just did a podcast. I just did a video on rereading stuff as a person that's becoming a better and better reader and how intimidating that is. And this is one of those books that's in the, I could reread this a million times and it's never going to become a less book. It's always going to feel like it's more.
Yep.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is because I have so much other stuff to read, but I think this will be the book, even though it's an ebook, but this will be the book that I take away with me. So when I've done reading the crime and all the other stuff, I'll just sit and read this for a week and just.
Or those moments when you're wondering, like, am I really an artist?
Yeah.
Like, what is it to be really an artist? Or when you're really sad and you can't write because you've got writer's block, like this is that book.
This is that book. Yeah. So many things.
So let's talk a little bit about the themes. So the big theme is the one that's the same theme of her show, right? Her solo show, which is about loss, big loss and personal loss. And is there a difference? Is there big or small, or is it just loss? I just wanted to know what you guys thought about the way she portrayed loss and the hole in your heart, the empty chair. Yeah.
What I found interesting is I'm also reading Year of Magical Thinking with Joan Didion. And that is the book where Joan Didion talks about the death of her husband and the year after his death and how she deals with his loss. And that book comes at it in a very academic way in some ways. It's a memoir, but it has a very academic feel. She did a lot of more academic, more New York Times-y, like long article type writing before she wrote that book. And so it has that feel. This is the artistic version of that. Like a lot of the things that she talks about in Year of Magical Thinking, you see in this book without all the footnotes and the quotes from scientists and stuff. And it's done in a way that is easier to understand and feels more real, partially because it's a story, but also it's very accurate. You know, that feeling of thinking magically, of feeling like something's being transformed, of feeling that deep loss, that loss that comes back over and over. You know, it goes away and then comes back, and then you relive things and you regret things and you wonder, could things have been different? All those things you see in the Year of Magical Thinking, but in this book, you see those same things, but it's done in a really emotional, artistic, and realistic way. And having come off the death of my mother, it's several years out, and I still get those reflections and things, you know, and I really felt for her when she talks about the moments when her and her father separated, like when they became less close, you know, and how you relive those moments after someone is gone. It was just really real, and there was nothing pulled back. It was honest.
Yeah, I like the way that she was paralleling the character's art with the author's writing, and so seamlessly, so it sort of felt like you were within that character and exploring that loss, and I loved the parallel and the sort of intermingling of her as an artist and the author's writing.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, that parallel was really important, you know, and watching her work through it with her art and seeing how one thing that interested me because I go to an art salon. I think it's like every 3 weeks, where it's not just writers. There's painters and musicians and a playwright, and we all get together and we share our work. We share a piece of whatever it is we're working on, and everybody's work informs everybody else's work. There's something that comes out of experiencing other forms of art that affects my writing, and I can see that happening in this book, but especially in that last section where she is healing and going through her past and everything, and the references to color as she's painting. It really reminded me of how I feel after those art salons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as far as working through my own shit and seeing things differently. And it's like this magical transformation that happens of the self when you're creating art. And I think that she put that on the page in a way that I haven't really seen before. There's a lot of great books out there about artists, but I haven't seen that process of transformation, that magic that happens, really put on a page in a way that felt real until I read this.
Yeah, if there's any listener who hasn't read the book and is listening to this, there's sections where it's just the character conceptualizing the art, thinking, okay, so there's an altar, there's this white ghost, there's a flower, there's this, there's that. And you just see that process of how they try to, which I've never seen written down anywhere. Like I've seen written down where you get the finished product and then you start talking about what it meant to the painter, but to see the painter in the process changing the thing that they're working on and going inside their head and seeing the connections that they're making. And even the times when those connections are like, okay, something's missing, I'll figure it out later, that's fine. This is enough, I'll start on this. Just that kind of just like process part of it was really fascinating.
And also
and when she's in,
that she was referring to the books from other artists, and she was looking at artists in the books, and I thought, I didn't know artists did that. So that she would refer to these books and get sort of influences that would inform her current art.
I mean, I think writers do that. You know, at least the writers I talk to, the ones that have like stacks of books that are covered in notations and stuff, and they really study craft. I know that, you know, when they get blocked, sometimes they'll go back to certain books that unblock them, certain books that evoke certain feelings or whatever. And I love that she's showing that as a visual artist. Also, the way she thinks when she is in art mode, I'll call it art mode, is very similar to the way she was thinking when she showed up and her dad is being carted away. It's this very choppy, like making points and thinking all over the place, but it makes sense. And I thought that was really fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then moving away from like the pain and the art stuff, I think also the way that she would comment on other people, this was very brief, but the sort of insights she had on other people, there was this whole thing about how Tony has never really experienced loss. He's never lost anything. And that sort of makes him shallow in a way, which I thought was an interesting sort of point. She doesn't use the word shallow, but that's ultimately what she means, you know. And then you compare it with her mother, who's not an artist. Did I freeze again?
Mm-mm. I guess we froze for her, but she's not frozen.
We're fine.
We see you.
We hear you. I think she's frozen now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I froze again. I think I'm back now. Am I back?
Yeah, you are back.
Yep,
yeah.
you're back.
Okay. I was saying that there were these insights she would make into other characters that were small, but really, they just felt really true. Did I freeze again?
No.
Okay. And so there was one where she was talking about how Tony has never lost. He's only had wins. He's never lost anything. It sort of makes him a more shallow person, which if you see that alone, it just feels a little like snobby. But then you have the mother, Eliana, who is somebody who has had a difficult life. She was in Cuba. She had to come over, you know, like a refugee type thing. And she's experienced a full life. And she has that line where they're at the art installation in the Freedom Tower with all of the voices around her. And the mother just starts sobbing. And her mom isn't necessarily an artist. She isn't somebody who is steeped in this all of the time, but just she even has that line about how when you live the full life, you need to live a full life in order to understand this, that I thought was really good commentary on interpreting art. Like, it's also based on your own experiences. There is something to experience that makes it profound.
Yeah, yeah, because especially modern art is not, it's not a picture. It's not something that say, oh, that's a nice picture of a horse or a scenery or something, but it's an interactive process. So you see into it what you want to see, and a good artist will draw you out and draw your uh, your interaction with what they've produced.
Definitely.
And even the artist that the narrator likes, like she likes Rothko, which Rothko does the color blocks. Like it's a little bit like, even, you know what I mean? Like it's even.
He's the epitome of when people say, "Oh, modern art," they just put some colors on a canvas.
Exactly. You just put, anyone could do that. So just there's something a little bit like taunting about choosing specifically that. Like she's not even going with like Picasso, where then you can talk about, okay, it's modern art, but he's giving you a lot of perspective at the same time, and he's playing with light, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm just going to give you color blocks, and you just accept that this is profound, which means that if you're not already there is something about this book that it's not challenging, it's not impenetrable, but there is like a certain code where there's something, some people, if you're not exposed to this, you're just not going to get it. And it doesn't make the story any less, but
I think that's the benefit of including a lot of the art in the book. And that's something we haven't talked about is I like, I recently went through Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Yeah, we won't talk about that book. And Riggs uses photographs, like old photographs within that book to inform the book. And it wasn't done well. I'm just going to say it was not done well. It's not even a YA book that I would recommend to YA children. This book includes images of the paintings before each section. In the section of the colors, there are scribbles of the actual colors. There are sections where there, like you said, when she was trying to get influence on the color because she ran out of red and she goes to that Picasso painting, it is included in here. And as she's talking about the photo, it's right there. And it really influences the story. I honestly think that had those photos not been there, it might have actually read differently, which is really the only time I think you should include something like that in a book. I felt like it definitely informed how I read the story, and it was done in a really helpful way.
Yeah. I also, there was a moment where when she's making up the story of Fern based on a photograph of 4 teenagers she's never even met before, partway through the story of Fern, I was like, I had like this meta moment where I was like, wait a minute, I'm reading, it's just like she's basically like making up a story. She's making up fiction about this photograph. It has nothing to do with anything else. And yet at the same time, it feels like you were saying the story is incomplete without it, because that's how she finally gets that final the idea of the balloon with the chair and the basket and sewing together all of the shirts. But this idea didn't actually come from some other person's art. It came from her own imagination based on a photograph of 4 teenage girls.
Yeah.
There is no balloon in the photograph,
But that's how artists work.
Exactly. That's what was so fascinating.
And that's what's fascinating. Yes. I mean,
that process.
This really is a treatise on what it is to be an artist. It doesn't matter what kind of art you do. Like I could hand this to a musician and they would have the exact same emotional response. They would have a lot of the same comments that we have. Wouldn't have to be a writer, wouldn't have to be a painter. But I know for a fact I can hand this to a musician. They'd be like, I recognize this. This feels right.
There's also that line where she talks about looking at a painting by a true master painter, and you see a certain mark, and you're like, how could a human create that mark? How could a human make that, that golden line? And I was like, girl, that's how I feel about this book. I'll read a sentence and I'm like, how did a human write this?
Which makes me mad, because how did a human write this and be a painter as well, and a poet and a playwright? She did the painting on the front of the book. That is her work.
Really?
And I'm like, it should be illegal to be that multimedia. If you can write, you're not allowed to paint. You're not allowed to make sculptures. If you can write, no.
You're done.
No. On what crossroads did you stand and wait for the boogeyman to come so you could sell your soul to become the ultimate artist? Like, this is not fair. You're playing with the whole deck. You're not allowed.
Okay. I don't know if there's much more fawning I can do before I start getting
Oh my
repetitive.
god. Yeah, we're gonna have to stop because this is totally a fawn fest. I don't
And
even know.
we're an
Like, I'm
hour
thinking,
in.
I'm like, could we have handed this to somebody that could have hated it?
I think so.
And I honestly
but
don't think.
I know. I think
Really? Who?
Tony. You know who would hate this
Yeah.
book? Fucking Tony.
No, because he would want to be the good person and he would want to be perceived as being artistic. So he might hate it, but he will make himself feel like he loves it.
Maybe. But remember,
No,
Tony
no.
will roll his eyes at certain things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
true.
he has this expression on his face when he looks at art, and he's, and he looks bored, and yeah, he's
Gosh, this book,
good.
man.
He'll read it, and he'll just say, yeah, well, it was okay.
When was this published? 2015?
Mm-hmm.
How did this not get on the Man Booker list? Did nobody give it to the committee?
I wonder whether
It should have been on the long list.
I wonder whether non-artists would get it. Non-writers,
I
non-artists.
think they would.
I don't know.
I mean, there was room.
Man Booker isn't reviewed by non-artists anyway, so it should be on that list.
It's like editors and people that
But no.
pay attention to writing and art. Like, there were books on the long list that really were just kind of plain. It was not a great year. I mean, there were some great books, but it wasn't like a year where every single book you're like, oh my god, all these books are amazing. This should have been on the long list, at least.
Maybe.
There's my rant. I'm done.
Okay.
Let's go back to surface level real quick. So if we have any readers who read to the surface level and just want to talk, because I feel like we're going in really deep because that's what interests us. But there's a lot of surface stuff that you're like, let's get to the gossip. Yes, no, quick poll. Should Veronica have gotten with Leo? Yes, no.
Oh, that's hard.
Okay. I don't think she can because their relationship was such like a big brother sister kind of relationship.
Mhm.
It would have been really weird.
Okay.
It's like my son had his best friend had a crush on him, and they were friends since like middle school.
Mm.
And they would have made a great couple, but it would be like being with a sister. Like it's not going to work.
Okay.
But him with Lee just.
Yeah, I think the history of her meeting him when he was 15, was it, or something?
Mm-hmm.
16.
15, 16. She can't get over that. So yeah, I was sort of hoping, but because he seemed at that stage he was such a good guy, and he'd come all the way to Miami for her and to help her out, but no.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. Their relationship's good as is. Yeah. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much does Tony suck? God, he's the worst at the end. Yeah. I'm just saying there is some surface stuff. I'm kind of doing this little tongue in cheek.
He is what he is. He is what he is. He has emotions too. We're not getting really into his head to know like how much all this hurts him or whatever. And I like to think the best of people, but
if she hadn't have been looking forward to marriage and kids, I think he was a good partner. I think he was a good partner.
I think it would have split no matter what, even if she wouldn't have forced a marriage. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think he was a good partner as long as she needed him.
He's not a bad guy. It's just with the post breakup, the booty call.
Yeah. Okay, I have something that I want to say.
Surface thing?
Top level, because I know people are going to read this. They're going to be like, what's up with all the fat shaming? So, anyways, help. Like, how do I explain this to someone that doesn't read literary fiction and sees how her father is described and is offended by it?
Wait, you broke up a little bit for me. So what about her dad?
I when I read this book, I'm amazed by how fat is used as a symbol, and how it's used as a literary device. But for someone that doesn't read literary fiction, I could very well see somebody reading this and being like, what's up with all the fat shaming? And I don't know how to explain that to them.
Actually, no, I actually thought it wasn't. I think it took head on, honestly and accurately, fat shaming. But this guy was still, it would be fat shaming if he then couldn't get any girlfriends and was a sad sack and was a hermit. That's fat shaming. But he still got out. He was still charismatic. Yeah. There was lines about how when he wanted something done, it would get done, and how he was very ambitious. So I think the fact that he still led a pretty full life. He led a full life. The fat shaming that's there, you're supposed to find the fat shaming abhorrent. You know what I mean? Like there's like a level at which it's like, I think it's actually kind of like a I don't want to say like pro obesity, but just like the idea that obesity isn't some moral sin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I felt reading it. But I was like, how would I explain that to somebody? There's something about, in particular, the way the hospital treats her father when he needs help, and they can't really do anything for him because he doesn't fit in any of the machines. They can't weigh him. Nobody really wants to touch him. They can't move him because they need all these nurses and doctors and neighbors in order to move him. There's something very humiliating hospital environment when you are that big. And that's something that a lot of really big people who have been in the hospital will tell you about. It is an extremely humiliating experience, the way that really big people are treated in a hospital environment.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that was put on the page.
Yep.
And when they called the zoo to find out if they could use their CAT scan machine, and the zoo's responses, we get these calls all the time and we're not able to. And they're like, but you have the machine? And they're like, yeah, but tell the hospital it's for animals, it's not for humans. Just, right in the gut, man.
And I think most of the fat shaming things that go on are, fat people are lazy, fat people get no women, fat guys get no women. And in this, he's got a ton of women, a ton of girlfriends, and he's very successful as a businessman, and he's worked his way up, and he's got money, and he's got stuff. So most of the traditional sort of fat shaming points that people make are dismissed here. So no,
and they're all in the mouth of other people. Like when she's young, she's uncomfortable with how big he is, but the really like stereotypical things people think about fat people, it all comes from the other people, like the ambulance and the doctors. They're like, is he always like this? And they're like, what? Yeah. What do you mean? He's like laying there, can hardly breathe. Is he always like this? What are you talking about? No, he's not an immobile man. Like that was just beautiful.
Yeah. And I think that's a good example of surface things. I don't think you have to be a very well-read reader to catch that. And I think because that's also a conversation that's happening. And I feel like there's a lot of people who would read this and understand that, because even if you yourself aren't extremely overweight, you probably know someone who is. Actually nowadays in the United States is very common. So, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about extremely overweight people in my life who say stuff like that. Where like doctors are just like less invested in helping you and things like that. And she did both sides of this also, which this book covers so much ground. This is, again, surface level. She covers the obesity aspect of things and the anorexia thing very well, where she gets into the head of what it's like to resist eating and not want to eat anything. She does both.
Yeah.
So good.
She does everything. Everything.
Makes you sick.
Yeah, no artist should be allowed to have all these tools. I'm just... It should be illegal. You're only allowed to have a few.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Hey, maybe because she's so talented and she poured everything into this book, which must have had like 1,000.
She's never going to be able to write another one. Is that what you're saying?
That's it. Yeah. That's it. You blew your load. You're done.
Except
Walter come out with a better one. Except no, there's going to be another one.
She's at the moment she's learning piano, so she's going to be a great concert pianist as well. Yeah.
The next one is going to be a novel with a musical accompaniment that you have to play while reading.
Leave it alone already. Just go fix cars or something.
Thank you, Vanessa, for making me feel incompetent and untalented. I really appreciate it.
Worthless.
And she's also, of course, gorgeous.
Yeah. Really? She is. She's gorgeous. Not fair.
Talk about having it all.
Apart from that.
But I do want her to keep writing, because I will read everything she publishes.
I'm in your boat. Okay. Yeah.
Should we do our 1-sentence ratings?
Yeah.
Okay, my sentence is: drop everything, go to Amazon or your library or your bookstore, and just read it.
Yeah, mine is: it's a good story, but a great book.
Damn, Gerald.
Damn.
With the amazing turn of phrase there, a little byline.
I take that, pull it, and put it in the comment, put it in the notes for this episode.
Yeah. Man. You know what? I can't follow that up.
Oh,
how do I follow that up?
Oh, I hate doing this.
Ditto.
Second. Yeah. Even. Refer to Gerald's comment. Okay.
Okay.
So any last comments before I go into the outro?
Have at it.
Okay. Read this book if you haven't already. And then next month, we're reading The Association of Small Bombs by Karan Mahajan. As you read that book, let us know your thoughts on Twitter with the hashtag LRH Book Club, or leave comments on our Facebook page or our website, Literary Roadhouse. Please leave a review on iTunes, along with a high art piece that best captures the mood and thrust of your review. And lastly, be our Lee. Support our shows by sponsoring us at patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse. Every little bit helps. This was a great discussion, you guys.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Oh my goodness, it was